There's nothing more frustrating than being deep into a sales conversation when all of a sudden a wall of objections appear. You feel like the deal is slipping through your fingers even though you've done everything right up until that point. We've all been there and you're not alone. Today, I'm tackling the 7 most common sales objections and more importantly, how you can overcome them so you can close deals faster and with more confidence. Whether you're just starting out or have been in sales for years, these strategies will help you take control of the conversation and keep the deal moving forward. Here's how we're going to break it down. First, I'll explain each objection, and then we'll talk about how you can avoid it before it even comes up. And then if it does come up, I'll walk you through the exact steps on how to handle it without losing the deal. And stick around to the end because I'm going to share a simple but very powerful framework that you can use to handle objections, whether it's one of these 7 or something else entirely. But before we dive in, I want to hear from you. What is a common objection that throws you off in your sales process? Price, timing, something like that. Let me know in the comments below. I'll be responding personally to help you walk through each of these and solve it in your sales process. Okay, let's kick things off with an objection that everyone in sales has heard at some point. It is, you're too expensive. Your price is too high. If you've been in sales for any length of time and you're not a bargain basement kind of option, this probably sounds familiar. Now, here's the thing. Price objections come up when the value has not been communicated clearly enough. The more value you build early on in the sales conversation, the less that price becomes an issue. So here's what you want to do upfront is focus on creating a direct connection between your solution and the specific pain points that your customer is experiencing. So what problems do they have? And how will your solution help them achieve or avoid this? By emphasizing ROI or return on investment from the very beginning, price becomes a bit of a secondary consideration. And when done correctly, it shifts the conversation away from just, hey, how much do you cost, to what is the value that I'm getting for this solution? Far better place to be in from a negotiation perspective. But what happens if you still hear, hey, your price is too high? Don't worry, I've got you covered. This is your chance to really dig deep and uncover what's going on in the psychology of your prospect's mind, right? Start by acknowledging their concerns. Something like, hey, I totally understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Now, here's the important part. Ask them to elaborate. Hey, can you help me understand what makes you feel like the price is too high? It opens the door into a deeper conversation about the real concerns that are underlying there. Maybe it's budget constraints. Maybe they're not seeing the real value of what you're offering yet. It allows you to uncover their true hesitation, not just that price, right? Because price is not an objection, and allows you to reframe the conversation back into the value that you provide. Remember, we're not selling a product or service. We're selling a solution to their problem. Tie your response back into how your offer addresses the challenges that you uncovered during the discovery phase of a call, and you'll see the price objection start to fade away. This next one is a classic, and it is, I need to think about it. This can catch a lot of salespeople off guard, especially early on, because it really sounds polite, but in reality, it often signals something else that's going on here. And to avoid this objection for me, I like to ensure decision-making clarity early on in a sales conversation. A really great way to do this is by asking questions up front early on in a sales conversation, like, hey, what does the decision-making process look like for you? Or who else needs to be involved in making this decision within your organization? And when I have a clear understanding of what's going on and how decisions are being made and who's making them, I can structure the pitch and kind of address those pain points really specifically before I ever get to the I need to think about it phase, right? It's all about getting those small commitments at each step along the way so that the final decision to work together feels really natural. But what if you still hear, I need to think about it? So first, don't push back too hard, right? Instead, I like to empathize with the prospect and say something like, hey, I totally understand. Making the right decision is important and I want to work with you. You should definitely take your time. I want to show respect for them and the decision-making process they're going through, right? So now we want to shift gears a little bit though and say, what's really going on and what's holding you back? And ask them something like, hey, so, that said, what part of this decision are you unsure about? Oftentimes when someone says, I need to think about it, it's just a smokescreen for something else, right? An underlying concern that they might have. So it could be price, it could be timing, it could be the belief in your solution. It could be that they are not the decision maker and they need to get approval from someone else, but you need to understand that so you can progress this deal forward. But by asking them directly, is it price? Is it timing? Is it product? Or is it something else? You're giving them a chance to open up and share their true concerns with you. And once we know what's actually going on, you can address this head on. And here's a bonus tip. I like to offer a subsequent meeting where I can walk through any kind of lingering concerns that my prospect might have with all decision makers present on the call. And that last part is really important, right? And do this on the call you're on. Don't leave it to email to coordinate, because if their inbox is anything like mine, it's a disaster, right? But doing this keeps the conversation moving forward, showing them that you're committed to helping them make the best decision possible. The third common objection you might face is, I need to run this by somebody else, right? They are not the decision maker. Whether it's a business partner, their boss, a team member, this objection typically means there's a gap in the decision-making process that you didn't discover in the discovery phase of the call. And so the best way to avoid this is to identify all key stakeholders early on in a sales call. This is done during the discovery phase, and we want to ask questions like, hey, who else will be involved in making this decision? So during the discovery phase, I might ask questions like, hey, who else is going to be involved in making this decision? Or is there any other stakeholders or people who we want to include on this conversation before we get started often? And so by doing this, you avoid the last minute surprises where they suddenly reveal that someone else has the final say and they're really just the information gatherer here. It also gives you the opportunity to address everyone's concerns directly and be a little more efficient with your time. Now, if you still hear, I need to run this by someone else, don't get discouraged. Here's how I like to respond. First, again, empathize. Hey, I totally understand that you need to consult with your partner or team member. This keeps the conversation positive. But next, I like to offer a really proactive solution. Hey, how about we set up a call next Tuesday so I can walk through everything with them directly? That way, all questions are answered and everyone's on the same page. You don't have to be the middleman and explain this to your management team. So this not only keeps me in control of the conversation, but also increases our chances of influencing the decision because I'm involved at every step throughout the way. And by offering to speak with all the decision makers together, I'm taking the pressure off of my prospect and make it easier for them to say yes. I can also demonstrate, hey, I'm really committed to helping you make the best decision to get the outcome that you're looking for. Okay, quick break and kind of pulse check here before we dive into the next objections. If you're finding these strategies helpful and want to take your sales game to the next level, head over to craighewitt.com to learn more about information about my sales coaching program, which is designed specifically to help founders overcome objections like these and close more deals. Whether you need help refining your pitch or handling tough objections, I help founders with the tools and confidence you need to succeed. So if you're ready to level up your sales game as a founder, head over to craighewitt.com. I look forward to chatting soon. Objection 4 is a really important one and maybe one of the toughest of all, which is, hey, I just can't afford it, right? This one can really sting, especially if you haven't explored budget early on in the discovery phase of a call. And to avoid this, I like to qualify budget as early and as often as I can, especially with prospects that I'm not quite sure about. So I like to ask questions like, hey, what kind of budget do you have set aside for this? Or how much are you looking to invest in a solution like this? And this allows me to avoid any kind of surprises later on and ensures that my offer aligns with the financial capacity from the start. And if budget doesn't match, you can adjust expectations and explore other options that might fit their range or their needs. Now, if you still get hit with, I can't afford it, here's what I like to do. First, acknowledge that the concern might be real, right? Don't dismiss or argue with it. That just doesn't do anybody any good. Instead, say something like, hey, I understand you might have the budget right now. Let's talk about what we can do, right? I like to show empathy, keep the conversation going, productive, and collaborative. And from here, I can reframe the objection by offering solutions that work within their financial constraints. Maybe a payment plan, financing options, a discount in certain situations, and even a scaled back version of the offering that can still address their needs and solve the problem that they have. And the goal here is to help them see that even if their budget is tight, there might still be ways to move forward and solve their problem. Remember, just because they say can't afford it doesn't mean the conversation is over. It's all about finding the right path that works together for both of you. Objection 5 is a tricky one and usually comes more in the lead generation kind of phase of a sales process, which is, hey, we're already working with someone else. And this can really stop a conversation cold, especially for younger, more inexperienced salespeople, but it doesn't have to, right? When someone says this, usually it's just to kind of brush you off, or they're generally happy with their current provider. For me, the key here in avoiding this objection is to discover the pains associated with their current provider early in the conversation. If this is in a proper sales conversation, don't wait to the end to say, hey, we're already working with someone else. During the discovery phase, I like to ask, hey, how are you solving this problem right now? Are you working with someone else? And if so, how's that going for you? Now, if you hear like, hey, we're already working with someone else, don't let it entirely derail the conversation. Acknowledge the competitor and then reframe the discussion into a positive way. You could say something like, that's great. I've heard really good things about competitor XYZ. Out of curiosity, if you get your magic Harry Potter wand out right now, what is one thing you would change about their service? And this is really enlightening. Often they reveal they're in some way dissatisfied with their current solution. It opens the door for you to highlight how your solution can address those gaps that the competitor has. Alternatively, you could ask hey, sounds like your current provider is really great and you're not even considering switching. Is that true? And this is a bit of reverse psychology that can lead them to rethink their position. You might hear something like, well, I didn't say that. And now you've got a thread you can pull on. For me, the goal here is avoid coming across as pushy or dismissive, but instead focusing on areas where their current situation might be lacking, and I can create an opportunity to provide value to them in the situation that they're in, and my solution is highlighted. We don't have budget is the next one. It is a variation of I can't afford it, but more specific to corporate or B2B kind of environments where it might sound like a hard stop, but often it's a signal that the prospect and the individual person that you're talking to hasn't really prioritized this solution within their current spending, right? Every single person you talk to in a B2B environment has a budget. They have multiple budgets, and it's just that yours is not reached to the top of their to-do list. And so to avoid this, similar to the I can't afford it, what I really like to do first, I like to have the budget conversation early on in a sales process and say, hey, what kind of budget do you have set aside for this project? Or is there flexibility in the existing kind of overall budget if we find the right solution here today? The more transparent you can be about budget early on, the better it will be for you. Every B2B buyer has a budget. Don't be afraid of having that conversation. But if you're still hit with the, hey, we don't have budget, the next move is to challenge the priority of this project within an organization. And so I can ask questions like, hey, is this project a priority for your team right now? Is there something else taking precedence within the organization? And so this question helps you gauge whether your solution is really important to them or if it's just not the right time. If they confirm it's a priority, now you can work with them to find creative ways, whether it's adjusting the scope of your offer or financing or helping them make the case internally to sell this to their team to find budget for it. If they indicate that other projects are higher on the list, it's your opportunity to reposition your offer in a way that ties more into their pressing needs. You might say, hey, how could implementing this solution free up resources or solve problems that are impacting your current priorities and challenges in the organization? And in either case, we're steering the conversation back to how our solution fits into the bigger picture and helping them see why this investment makes sense, even if budget is tight. The last objection we'll cover is, I'm just too busy right now, man, right? And this is a common one, especially if your prospect doesn't see your solution as an immediate priority or if you don't solve the entire problem that they're having. But here's the thing. When someone says they're too busy, what they're really saying is, hey, this just isn't a priority for me right now. And to avoid this, I like to establish urgency and define and kind of agitate the pain early and often in the sales process. I like to do this by highlighting the consequences of delaying action, asking questions like, hey, what's the cost of not solving this problem right now? Or how would postponing this impact your team and your goals in the future? All of us are in some way selling against the status quo of a company just doing nothing, right? We're all competing against Excel in a way. And when your prospect understands that risk of inaction, whether it's lost revenue, increased cost, or continued inefficiencies, they're much less likely to just brush you off with a I'm too busy type of excuse. But if you still hear I'm too busy right now, first, again, acknowledge their situation. For example, you say, hey, I completely understand you're busy. We kind of all are. Let's talk about why this still might be the right time to move forward. Show sympathy while steering the conversation back towards some kind of action that we can take together, and then reframe urgency by focusing on what they stand to lose by delaying. You can say something like, hey, what happens if we wait another 6 months to solve this problem? Will it be easier or harder to tackle then? And it makes them think about the long-term impact of inaction and postponing a solution and can create urgency for you to close that deal. Time kills all deals. Don't forget that, right? And our goal here is to help the prospect realize that despite their busy schedule, addressing the issue now will save them time and resources down the road and shifts the conversation from I don't have time to I can't wait to do this. Okay, let's quickly recap what we've covered today. We tackled the 7 most common sales objections from your price is too high to I'm too busy right now and kind of everything in between. And for each one, I showed you how to avoid the objection up front by asking the right questions and setting clear expectations in the sales process. And when, or if, the objection does come up, you have the strategies to handle them with confidence and turn opportunities into closed deals. And if you enjoyed this video, check out the one on the top of the screen where I walk through the 5 questions you should ask in every sales conversation to close more deals. If you're enjoying the channel, please like, subscribe, smash the bell, and we'll see you next time.